Good afternoon to viewers in the United Kingdom. Good morning, good evening to viewers elsewhere in the world. Welcome to another In Conversation with myself, Paul Salahuddin Armstrong. Today, I'm going to be joined by, well, you can already see she's already here, Reverend Maggy Whitehouse. She has lived a remarkable life, been involved in journalism, broadcasting. She's been a chaplain, a Kabbalist, a priest, and she's also a stand-up comedian. So we would like to welcome Maggy Whitehouse. And, Maggy, please tell us a little bit about yourself and
Oh,
how
it's
your
lovely to
journey
be
began.
here. Lovely to be here with you. Thank you, Paul. Yes, I was a journalist in the old days in newspapers, local newspapers. We don't have so many of those nowadays. A very interesting training that was. Local newspapers and then local radio and then national television and then finally as a journalist at the World Service. And in fact, my last ever working shift was the night of 9/11, where I was assistant news editor, which was, I wasn't meant to be. I was actually a writer for Africa overnight, but that night it was all hands in. So I was following around the news editor and helping him then. So it's been quite a high adrenaline kind of life. And I didn't think about God much. We went to church. I was what I'd call an armchair Christian, if you know what I mean. I'd turn up at Christmas and Easter. I'd
Yeah.
put that on the forms. I said the Lord's Prayer. I said prayers when I was in trouble, but I didn't think much about it until I was in my early 30s and I traveled to China to make a documentary for Channel 4. And I met a sound recordist there, Henry Barley. We fell in love and we got married. And Henry died 1 year and 16 days after our wedding. And the hospital chaplain at his deathbed said to me, "What religion are you, my dear?" And I said, "Church of England." And he said, "And what religion is your husband?" And I said, "Oh, he's an atheist." And the chaplain literally got up, said, "Well, I'm very sorry, my dear, but if your husband doesn't believe in our Lord Jesus Christ, he can't go to heaven," and left the room.
Oh my goodness.
Now, this is 35 years ago,
Yeah.
and in a very strange way, that chaplain was an angel because he woke me up. Just sitting
As a
there
chaplain
at this.
myself, and a
Hmm?
Muslim chaplain, I mean, I deal with people of all faiths and none, and I couldn't dream of turning around and saying that to someone. But
No, but it woke me
yeah,
up, Paul. It made me go, hang on, this is a better man than I, because frankly, I've been a bit of a trollop in my youth. And I thought, well, hang on, why do I get to heaven? Because I've signed on the right dotted line and he doesn't.
mm,
And that was what really made me go, okay, I'm going to throw this whole thing out of the window, which is what, of course, a lot of people do when they're hurt by their own religion.
of course, yeah.
And I tried very hard to throw it all out of the window, but God just wouldn't go. And I threw myself into the New Age. This was back in the early 90s, and that was quite paramount at the time. So I trained in healing because that was the one thing that did help Henry while he was dying. And there came a point, I think it was 3 or 4 years in, when I realized that for all these chanting with chakras and working with healing, there was something still very wrong because there was figuratively in the corner of my room, there was a kind of a table with a beautiful silk covering covered in crystals and candles and flowers. And underneath it, hiding, was a suppurating hatred of Christianity. And I thought, that has got to go. So I thought, I'm going to have to get into this and
Mm,
find out what this is all about. I'm just journalistic. I'm not a scholar.
mm,
I'm a friend of mine said an expert is actually the person who can interpret what the scholars have researched for the everyday person. And I really like that. That's what I do. So I decided I was going to go to university to study New Testament Greek to find out what that ratbag Jesus was all really saying in the original language.
mm.
And then I discovered there's more than 32,000 different versions of the New Testament in Greek, not just the one we generally have translated or the general codexes that we have translated. So that threw me a little bit. But once I started investigating it, it was utterly fascinating but for two reasons. One was that I'd never really read the whole of the Bible before, and I got interested in the Hebrew Testament as well. And the other was that everything, all the translating tools that you had always been written by men. And I'm not anti-men in any way, shape, or form, but there is always a different bias from the feminine than from the men, and from the masculine and the feminine. I have a lot of masculine in me. I'm not saying men and women. There's a feminine and a masculine
Yeah,
aspect.
we all have a little bit of the other aspect within us, but
We
yeah.
do indeed. And I started thinking, well, hang on, how would I interpret this as a woman? And I had no way of going with that. This was quite some time ago, and I didn't know what to do. And I literally went to a church and lay down in the ordination position, which is a cross, lying down on your face on the floor, and said, God, you've got to help me with this. I really don't know what to do or where to go, but I want to learn.
Mm.
Very, very swiftly, God introduced me to a Jewish man who was as far at the end of his tether with Judaism as I was with Christianity. And we got together for 8 years. And through him, through my teacher of healing and through him, I discovered Jewish mysticism, which was Kabbalah. You can see the diagram known as Jacob's Ladder behind me, which is one of the
That's the chapter
Kabbalistic
of your
codes.
life that I met you as well, and I've got your
Yes,
book,
that's right. Yes.
one of your many
So
books actually. You've got a few, haven't you? But that's
22
when
now.
I started joining your Kabbalistic groups and events.
Well,
Um,
what was so wonderful about it is that it's an oral tradition.
mm,
And the Zohar, which is one of the great Kabbalistic books, which is a medieval book, allegedly channeled from the second century, but nobody knows. And one of the thing it says in the prologue is that anyone who brings a new interpretation of Torah for their generation creates a new heaven.
wow.
And that was the root of the teaching which my teacher, Zev Ben Shimon Halevi, gave to us. My now ex-partner and I traveled down from Birmingham to London for 8 full years, 3 terms a year, every Thursday evening, 3 hours in either direction, to first study for 1 hour with this man because we got so much out of it. And it just taught me that when you have the oral tradition, but remember, a synagogue is also known as a shul, which is a
Yeah.
school, is where you debate these things. And of course, way back in Jesus's day, it wasn't just written down in a great big book. It was debated. It was talked about. It
Yeah.
was there were all the Book of Revelation is not the only apocryphal apocalyptic text of the times. There are many of them. There's the one of Abraham, there's one of Isaac, one of Joseph, many of them. And you realize that just because there's a canon in place doesn't mean to say that you can't talk about it and say, but what about this? But what about that? And I don't understand the other. So every
Mm,
Thursday evening, we would be in this wonderful debating group that could just say, I don't get this. Can you help me understand it? And everybody coming together and saying, well, from my tradition, I'd say this. And from the Jewish tradition, we'd say that. And from the Islamic tradition, we didn't have many people who were Muslims, but we did have a couple of Baha'is who were really helpful. And it was just so refreshing to be able to say, I don't understand. So I went and studied that way for
I think
eight
it's
years.
really vital to have those sort of spaces where people can, like
Yes.
safe spaces where people can just have those open conversations. I mean, I've done a bit of that myself with
Mm,
people from different backgrounds, and no matter, I mean, no matter what religion a person is, no matter what tradition they come from, the things that you're highlighting here, a lot of people face them. I mean, I'm also a part of KUPI too. I joined this conference in Indonesia,
mm,
which is KUPI is for the women's ulama of Indonesia, and also some came from surrounding places. And they were discussing like very similar things to what you were discussing about how it's often presented from a man's perspective,
mm,
and men are making rulings, religious rulings, on how women should practice Islam
mm.
when they don't know how to be a woman. They've never been
No.
a woman. So how can they judge it? And just the other way around, it wouldn't work the other way around either. If women were telling men how to,
Yes.
I would feel, I wouldn't like that. I'd feel uncomfortable with that. And I thought about this myself, and I supported it.
Mm,
Um, but a lot of people don't get it. I mean, it's just simply just put yourself in the other shoes and think, well, would you like women telling you how to do things and how to dress and how to? Of course, we wouldn't.
mm,
It has to be either women making decisions for women and men making decisions for men, and or a combination of both, discussing and respecting each other and trying to understand each other, which I think is maybe even better. But where that's not happening, then it needs more women, to do that for the women.
Well, you were very helpful to me because you said you teach that the prophet just said that a woman should be modest.
Mm.
And modesty is akin to humility, which is the same as Jesus taught in the Beatitudes.
Yeah.
Blessed are the humble. It's translated as meek, but it means those with humility if you look into the Greek. And it was
And that's
really
actually for
helpful.
men and women. We're all
Yeah,
supposed to
of
be
course it is.
humble.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed.
Mm.
Having the humility to realize that you are not always right.
Mm.
So important to understand you're not always right. But it was,
We're often wrong.
yes, very frequently wrong. And we can learn. It's so important to keep on learning and also to try and present these faiths of ours in a way that is actually relevant for today, because so much of both your faith and my faith is museum curation.
Yeah. True.
And we are meant to
Mm.
be channels of the living waters.
That's actually one of the differences between the teachers that I get my style from. They teach it as a living tradition.
Mm,
And that one of the conflicts that you find between them and between some people who only learn from the books is they're like, but in the books it says this. And they'll be saying, no, that's not what we were taught by our teachers. We're taught to interpret the books
mm,
as they're supposed to be interpreted in each generation, and not to just like bring things that are ruling some 100 or 200 years ago that might not be relevant now, or they might be relevant somewhere else in the world, but not relevant to here. You
yes.
need to have that cultural and timely context.
And also, it really annoys people when you tell them that biblical Hebrew had no vowels. It was
Mm.
just the consonants. They put in the vowels, and in the Masoretic text, which was set in stone about the 2nd century of the Common Era, they put in vowels, the vowels. So those
Mm.
are the vowels which are kept now. But if you change some of the vowels, you find things very, very differently. The vowels at the moment, when God speaks, Yahweh speaks to Eve when she leaves the Garden of Eden, is basically saying you're going to suffer in
Mm.
childbirth and you will be subject to the man. But if you actually change some of the vowels there, it says you've been caught by a snare, and when you turn to your husband, you will be ruled by him. The implication being if you stay focused on God, you'll be okay.
Oh.
And the word
Yeah.
conception isn't there. The word for conception is in the book of Ruth and it requires another consonant. But it's been translated for centuries as you will suffer in conception and birth. So that becomes the norm.
And of course, both of us are speaking English. And
Yes.
once you translate these books into English, you lose some of the subtlety and the multiplicity of meaning that both Arabic and Hebrew have,
Yes.
because they're sister languages. What you mentioned about the vowels, it was the same with the very first writing of the Quran. So like the later editions, they put the dots in and the
Mhm.
dashes, but the very early ones, some of them they don't have that because that came in a bit later to help people to read it. I mean, it's there for a very
Sure.
good reason. But at the same time, what if they put one of those vowels in the wrong place?
Yeah. There's a
I mean,
wonderful book
it can
called
change the
Misquoting.
meaning quite considerably. It's like the main letters, yeah, we know that's the same even in the oldest Qurans, because I mean we've even got one in the University of Birmingham, which
Yeah.
is carbon dated, but without the vowels.
Yeah. There's a
Mm.
wonderful book by Bart Ehrman, who used to be a fundamentalist Christian and actually became an atheist because of his research into the Bible, because he didn't have that mystical aspect that you and I have of wanting to find out a deeper truth within it rather than just saying, well, that's not right.
Mm.
Yeah, but anyway, he has a picture in this book, which is of an ancient scroll. And of course, in those days, very few people read and wrote. So if you were copying a scroll, it was generally read out to you, read out to a group of men. The first women that we know of who was copyists are Middle Ages. So way back, it was always the men. And
You
this
mean
person
they didn't
had,
have these shops where you just went and bought a book and it was all printed?
no, 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 you didn't.
I
No, you
know,
weren't
but
meant to
people
sit down and read
they
it. You
forget
were
this.
meant
Yeah,
to teach it.
yeah.
But anyway, he's got this,
Mm.
he's noted that the scribe has edited what he's written
Mm.
to try and make it make more sense. And he's written, crossed it out and written in the margin, fool and knave, leave it as it was. So that also shows how often we've had these
Mm.
edits put in. A lot of St. Paul's teachings, for example, including the ones about women not preaching, are genuinely thought to be later edits. But also you
mm,
can look at it, if you look at the cultural and social mores at the time, which I love doing. My first novel, The Book of Deborah, was actually immersed in biblical times. It's a story about a female cousin of Jesus who's raised in the Holy Family after her family are killed. And it was the book of my healing. That was literally given to me by God at Qumran. It was extraordinary. But it's all about actually just sort of saying, how do we live this? How do we breathe this? Because if it isn't a living, breathing tradition, it's pretty much worthless.
it can actually even be dangerous
Yes.
because, this is what we've found with extremism that has emerged within our faith community,
Yeah.
is that people are interpreting things that really are not relevant for this time.
Mm,
Some of those points may have had some relevance in some very disorderly place where there isn't rule of law and there isn't, a long time ago. But they're not intended for a society like now. They're not intended for a community that has the rule of law, that has some kind of civility and proper
mm,
systems and institutions. Those things should be put to one side.
yeah.
But instead, they're focusing on those things and ignoring all of the body of teaching, which is to do with societies like ours, which are
Yeah.
organized, and when you're supposed to actually follow that instead.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it
Jesus
can be
says
very dangerous.
21 times, follow me.
Mm.
Now, he says, I and the Father are one and worship God the Father, but he doesn't say worship me
No.
ever. He says, follow me, do as I do. Love everybody as I have loved you. But once we got the Nicene Creed, because Rome took over Christianity in the year 313 of the Common Era when Constantine adopted it and set it all down in stone. And it suddenly became about what you believe as
Mm.
opposed to what you do. Whereas to me, religion that is not on your feet, doing everything that your teacher asked you to do, loving the outsider, loving the poor, taking care of people, but just basically goes around, you've got to believe that. Can you see there's
Yeah.
so much harshness in that? You're going to hell unless you believe that. Whatever
Mm.
that hospital chaplain thought he was doing, he was not kind. And I cannot believe
Mm.
that if, by the grace of God, Jesus had been there, that he would have said that. Of course, he
I
wouldn't
agree.
have
Yeah.
said. He'd have said, my dear, the pain. And he would have touched Henry, who was ritually impure at that point, and I would probably have been ritually impure at that point, and Jesus would have put his arm around both of us. I'm absolutely convinced of that. Now, obviously, I don't know because it hasn't
But
happened.
whatever he did, he would have shown some humanity and kindness and compassion because this was who he was. And there isn't, in fact, there is indeed an example in the canonical Gospels when those very rude uh, Pharisees and Sadducees of the time, they brought this woman before him and said she's a sinner.
Mm,
She's done fornication, or adultery.
yeah,
And he said, and they said, what's the punishment for this?
yeah,
And what did he do? He didn't say anything would make things worse for the woman. He turned around to them and says, well, which of you hasn't sinned?
yeah,
Then you cast the first stone.
yeah.
And
There's a great
something
joke
mystical
about
must have
that.
happened as well. That is like in their hearts, it was they saw that side of themselves that was uncorrected, and they all felt shame and they all walked away.
Mm,
And then when she was left and no one else was there, he says, I see no one else to condemn you, and I
yeah,
don't condemn you either.
yeah.
I
He
mean,
does
that
say
is
go and do
humanity.
not sin again, but that's because she probably it wasn't wise. She was probably
Yeah.
unhappy and she was going to get caught again.
And of course,
But
that's like Victorian English. He probably said something more like,
go
probably
and take
phrased
care
like,
of
"Be
yourself.
careful, don't
Yeah,
get yourself into trouble," and
yeah,
I hope everything goes well for you.
yeah,
But by the time that gets written in, Aramaic, translated into Greek, then translated into Latin, and finally into English, you get this, the way it's
yeah,
worded in the Bible. But
yeah.
obviously, whatever he said would have been much more natural.
There's a lovely joke about that story from Dave Allen. Do you know of Dave Allen? He was a British comedian
Yeah,
who
I'm aware of
made,
him. Yeah,
yeah. May I tell it?
please carry on.
There you are. Jesus is confronted with the woman taken in with adultery, and everybody's standing there with a stone in their hand, going to throw the stone at the woman. He says, no, 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 no. Let those of you who are without sin cast the first stone. And they go, and he goes, no, no, those of you without sin, cast the first stone. And eventually they all go away apart from one woman, one elderly woman standing there with the stone, chopping, throwing it up and down, thinking about it. And Jesus says, let that she that is without sin cast the first stone. And the woman goes, right. What? And Jesus goes, Mother, you drive me crazy. It's silly, but I loved it. And it was Dave Allen sort of taught me that it's okay to be funny about God. And I love using humor to be funny about God. I mean, another of the things is in the Hebrew Testament, the New Testament, and almost certainly in the Quran, there's no punctuation. There was no punctuation.
Mm.
In fact, the words weren't even divided up. New Testament Greek was all joined together. Um, and I love sometimes putting in question marks with things about Jesus, given that Jesus, a couple of verses after he says to Peter, this is the rock on which I shall build my ecclesia, which means following, not actually church, but following. And then a few sentences later, he says, get thee behind me, Satan, to Peter. So I'm wondering whether you can add a question mark there and say, you know, he's doing that wonderful Jewish thing, saying, this is the rock on which I shall build my church.
Yeah.
Now, of course, people don't like that kind of joke. They think it's disrespectful. But actually, I think lightening this up and talking it through and saying, well, come on, Jesus must have smiled.
Well, he must have done. And humor's being used in all sorts of traditions. I mean, we've got someone in, I mean, there would have been many, but one of the Muslim, he was a sheikh, but he was also someone who obviously had a sense of humor. And there was many stories about him that have like remained with us to this day. And his name was Mullah Nasruddin. Some people call him Hoja Nasruddin. And his
Mhm.
stories are told all the way from Turkey right the way through Central Asia into
I've
India.
got one of the books.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yes.
he would say things like, there was one time that like the Imam was preaching, and he would be like saying, "Show me a man with a big beard, and I will show you a good Muslim." And Mullah Nasruddin would be like, Imam Sab, my goat has a bigger beard than you. Does that mean he's a better Muslim? Or there was another time where, they came to Mullah Nasruddin's house and they were asking, um, Nasruddin, can I borrow your donkey? Oh, no, no, it's died. you know, Maybe whatever reason he didn't want to
Mm.
lend the donkey to this person, you know. And then the donkey brayed. And what was that then? He says, are you going to believe me or my donkey?
Yes.
And of
Yes.
course, in all of these jokes, there was something that was teaching about character, teaching about humanity, teaching about it's encoded in humor. So I mean, and this is the other thing for our viewers who might not be aware. You're a stand-up comedian
Yeah.
as well as a priest, and you've managed to combine these different roles in a very unique way, and I think it's beautiful.
Thank
Would you
you.
like to say a little bit about that and what
Well,
caused you to go into comedy as well?
Well, that was a little bit like ordination. I got the whap from upstairs. But basically, I was ordained. Maybe we talk about that too, but it was, and people just kept saying to me when during sermons, during workshops, during talks, you're really funny. You should do stand up. And I was going, "Oh, don't be silly. It's a completely different discipline. I couldn't possibly do stand up." And then three people in the space of 2 weeks said it. And you know, and I know, Paul, that if you get three prompts, it's coming from,
Yeah, there's usually something more to it.
there's usually something going on there. So
Mm.
I thought, well, okay, this is a bit scary. And then I thought, well, you can't do comedy about religion. And then almost immediately I saw Jackie Mason on the television doing comedy about Judaism. And then I thought, well, I'm not sure I've got anything to say. I am a divorced woman. I was widowed and then divorced, and I'm a minister, so people weren't going to like that. And then I saw something by Sarah Millican saying that it was her divorce that got her to be strong and stand up to start being a comedian. So I was going, oh, well, all right. So I went on the internet and just typed in comedy course, Birmingham. And there was one starting the following week, 2 miles away from where I lived at £50. So I
Oh,
thought,
okay.
you rat bag.
Mm,
And I went. I went to prove that I couldn't do it. And of
mm.
course, I was, as soon as I walked in there, everybody else was really, really young. I was in my mid-50s at the time. And one of the girls said, "What are you doing here? You're like old. I don't like old people." And I just sort of
No
said,
way.
"Well, you'll get round to it in time." And everybody laughed. And I thought, yeah, but that wasn't funny. But by the end of it, I kind of graduated top of the class. And within 6 weeks, I was supporting Hal Cruttenden. So it was something that was wanted for me to do. And I went to my bishop a bit worried, actually, because I thought, oh dear, he's not going to like me doing this. And I said, I promise I won't do it in my dog collar. And he said, no, you must. You must. You're being
That's,
called to be a fool for God, which was
you know,
very gracious of him, I thought. But he is an
mm.
amazing man.
It's interesting, paths like this that they combine unusual combinations that you don't see so often. They interest me. I mean, it's like I recently became aware of a Catholic priest who does dance music, and he's actually using that to. Initially, it came out of raising money for charity,
Yes.
and then from that, he kind of like started to bring more and more people in, and he actually saved the church because
Mm,
like the church, its roof or something, I think was going to fall in or something. So it was originally come out of this kind of spirit that he started organizing like discos for
yeah.
people within his congregation, and they brought their friends. And over time, it becomes something bigger, and he's actually quite a well-known DJ now.
Mm,
And he's still an ordained Catholic priest, and he was even blessed by the late Pope Francis as well. He blessed his
lovely.
headphones. I mean, it's not something that you would expect, but
No,
because, as well as that, he's going out to an audience that wouldn't necessarily ordinarily come into contact with anything to do with Catholicism, the
mm,
church, Christianity, or religion,
mm,
and carrying, yes, okay, they're having a good time, he's making good music, but at the same
mm,
time he's also carrying some hints and inspirations that come from the church and connecting people to the church and getting people interested in it.
yeah,
And a lot of people won't get this, of course, because it is so odd, from their perspective.
it
But at the
is.
same time,
They
I
think
mean,
it's
how do you reach
heretical.
people?
Yeah. But heresy literally means strong or original thinker. That's
Really.
what the hereteus, the Greek word, means.
Mm,
It's been changed to mean somebody who's bad in faith, but actually, no, it's an original thinker. And Reverend Dr. Matthew Fox, of whom you may have heard, who has written many, many books, he was a Catholic monk, I think, and he was excommunicated by Pope Benedict. And one of the reasons why he was because he was talking about original blessing rather than original sin. That's one of my tropes as well. But he's created something called the cosmic mass, which is
mm,
where people go through four pathways of awe and celebration, of grief and lament, and then of dance and of creativity and transformation. And so in the cosmic dance, you've got people wailing out their grief
mm,
at harm that's been caused by religion and by many things, and then coming together to celebrate the joy that's in the faith. And I've not attended one, but I've witnessed one online, and they're extraordinary for making people really get into this because we are a species that needs ritual to come in together in community for prayer
yeah.
or for dance or for singing. It's incredibly valuable for us to do these things. And I tend to be a little bit of a loner, but even I know that the power of ritual is wonderful. I've got a mass, a Raphael mass, a mass for healing up on YouTube, where I literally talk people through it, saying this is the point at which the Holy Spirit comes through. So we'll do the next bit, and I want you to put your hand up with me and see if you can feel that energy come down.
Mm,
Having people on the line saying, well, your bread and wine is sanctified because this is a flowing energy of living spirit. So you sitting here with me are channeling Christ as much as I am.
mm.
And I think it's rather beautiful. Of course, some people hate it and think you can't do that. But my church has an open altar. We would
And,
never
and how,
turn
how dare
anyone
we
away.
do that in company of each other with different religious paths?
Yes, yes.
I know. The DJ priest is Padre Gulhemi. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right. It's Guilherme. Ilherme. He's a Portuguese Catholic priest, but interesting person. And he was also a military chaplain in Afghanistan. So he's like lived another really interesting. Maybe I'll have to try and do one of these with him. It'd be really.
Oh, I think you should. No shoulds, but that would be a wonderful thing to do.
I don't have his number, otherwise I would, or his email. I should find
Well,
out.
6 degrees of separation. Somebody who watches this may know somebody who knows somebody who knows him.
No, because it's fascinating. It's things like that. They bring life back into religion and connect religion with people's lives and everyday life. And that's what is often missing. And people wonder why is nobody going to the church or going to the mosque or going to the synagogue or whichever religious building it is.
Yes.
Well, if there's no life there, why would people go?
Well, absolutely.
I mean, you often see in many of these religious buildings, if like the children are playing, stop that. What are you doing? Be quiet. It's a holy place. Yeah. What happens to those children? Yeah. Do they come back to the mosque or the church or the synagogue? Do they have a good feeling from it?
Yeah. When I was 9, my parents took me to the Oratory in Birmingham. That was the big Catholic church there. And we were church-going people, and I was looking around. I was vaguely interested at 9, but I went up to the altar. I went up the altar steps, and I knelt in front of the altar and put my hands together and started to pray. And a Catholic priest ran out from the vestry, caught me by the elbow, and literally threw me down the chancel steps and said, "How dare you defame the house of God?"
And yet what you were doing was actually beautiful.
Well, I thought so.
I mean, if he'd have handled it in a much better way, it could have really helped your spiritual journey.
Yes, if he'd knelt down beside me and sort of said, perhaps, shall we move back a bit to give a little more space, if he thought that was necessary. But why would an innocent, well, not that innocent, I've been scrumping apples the week before, but a relatively innocent 9-year-old be defiling the house of God? And this is one of the things that is part of my role, my purpose, I think, is to say, if we look into these texts and reinterpret them, for example, it is entirely possible.
I'm just thinking, imagine if that 9-year-old was in the time of Jesus, peace be upon him, when Jesus was there in the temple, and he saw that 9-year-old come in and just put their hands, however, and start to pray. What would Jesus's reaction have been? What would Muhammad's reaction have been if he saw that in the mosque in Medina?
Yeah, suffer the children.
I'm sure they'd have been very happy and encouraged him.
Yeah. Oddly enough, one of the strangest places where I had absolute awe, I was let in when I shouldn't have been let in by 2 kind girls and a kind man. And that was the Grand Mosque at Kairouan in Tunisia, which is one of the 4 great mosques, isn't it? I was there on a tourist trip just on my own. And because it was Tunisia and I was younger then, I was dressed in hijab and, all covered up, because that was the only way I was going to stay fairly safe, because Western women were at a premium out there at that time. Anyway, I went on this trip to the Grand Mosque, and everybody else had a quick look round and then went off to the shops. And I went and washed my hands and feet and just stood outside the prayer room and waited until 2 young girls came along and said, "What do you want?" And I answered in French, "I want to go into the prayer room, please. I want to pray." And they went and fetched a man. He wasn't an imam. He was just somebody, probably a caretaker of some sort. And he kept saying, "Are you a Muslim? Are you a Muslim?" And I'm afraid I have to own up. I said, "I'm Baha'i. Je suis Baha'i. Je suis Baha'i." Because Baha'i are the most wonderful people who will interpret and move within all these faiths. And he pulled my head covering down just to make sure my fringe was covered, and opened the door and let me go into this room where nobody had been except to pray or clean for 900 years. And I tell you, Paul, I fell on my face on the floor with awe. So if anybody tells me the only way to God is through Jesus Christ, I have to say I have not found that to be true. If the Christ consciousness, one of my teachers, Richard Rohr, says that the Christ consciousness is in all things. It was held in the body of Jesus for those years that he was teaching, but it existed before him. He said that quite clearly. Before Abraham was, I am. He's not talking about Jesus of Nazareth. He's talking about this Christ energy. So I would call it Christ, you would call it something different, quite possibly Jewish folk would call it something different. But it was very powerful right there and
Mm,
then in this mosque. And another place where I felt it is the synagogue in Cordoba
mm.
in Spain. I felt it in churches as well, but God was always going to make it quite clear to me that do not limit this to just what you believe, please.
Well, when I was looking for spiritual answers myself, I visited many different places of worship, and I wondered why initially, until finally, I prayed. I was like, God, take the confusion away from me. Show me what
Mm,
you want from me. And God gave me the answers, like in my heart, for what I was looking for. But also, one of them that came to me was the fact I was shown all these different religions, so I understood that God's people were among all people.
mm,
And okay, this path, maybe from my perspective, from what I understand, might be more pure, might be
mm,
closer to the original truth or whatever, and resonates with me. But that does not mean that within the synagogues, within the churches, within the gurdwaras and other places, that there aren't people that are just as devoted to God. But
mm.
their understanding is obviously within their tradition because that's the way they were raised. That's the way they understood. It's
Yeah,
actually very few people convert as a percentage, a lot of people don't realize, even though like Islam and Christianity are religions that make a very active missionary work or
mm,
dawah work to try to invite people to their paths. But the
yeah,
reality is very few people actually convert from one religion to another religion as a percentage.
yeah,
Most people who are raised Christian either stay culturally Christian, even if they're not
yeah.
religious, or they just drift away from religion.
Mm,
Similarly with Muslims, similarly with Hindus or people of any religion, only a small percentage choose a different path and
yeah,
then follow it. Um, so it's like if that be the case, then how can all of these other people that are within these other religions be condemned by God when God has created them,
yeah.
God has made them? Yeah, no, it doesn't make sense to me.
No.
And I see within Islam there is something which is in the Quran where God says that um, he made a law and an open way for
I've
every
got
nation.
it. Hang on a second. I've
Yeah,
got it. Up on my wall. We have ordained a law and assigned a path for each of you. Had Allah pleased, he could have made you one nation.
yeah,
But it
that's the
is
one.
his wish to prove you by that which he has bestowed upon you. Vie with each other in good works, for to Allah you shall all return.
That's the one. Yeah, and
The
this is the
one.
thing. It's like it's there in the Quran, and God also tells us that He made us into nations and tribes and make them to know one another,
Yeah.
not despise one another.
Mm,
And also, there's something else in the Quran about. Well, anyway, also in the Quran it talks about believers, for
mm,
the people of the book as well.
yeah.
So there's a few different things that we can see within the Quran itself, and also within the Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him's treatment of both Christians and Jews.
Mm,
It was fair, it was honourable, it was kind.
mm.
He wasn't saying, "Oh, all of you are going to go to hell." And I think this is something which, sadly, you get some very narrow-minded, unclear people, I would say, within our tradition. People who feel insecure of their own religion and what they believe, that they feel the need to bully people over their religions, and this is not on. And you find people like this in a number of different
You do.
religious paths,
It's
but they don't
actually a
reflect what the real essence of all of them
yeah.
is, which is about getting closer to God, being a better human being, being a kinder person. Um, and that's the real essence of all of them.
And yet they would disagree with you about that. So it's only important to worship in this way. It is very strange, and I don't
Yeah,
really understand it. Occasionally, when I do comedy, people really do object. There are sometimes walkouts because I'm standing there making jokes about the Bible and my relationship with God. But I always have an opt out on that, which has said, I have been told that what I'm doing is disrespectful to the church. Well, I'm in a profession that's rife with misogyny, homophobia, and paedophilia. I hardly think one elderly woman making jokes about God is going to bring the clergy into disrepute. And that one actually generally gets a round of
Yeah,
applause, because you've got to
yeah.
just say, we're not necessarily doing that well. And I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily doing that well, but I'm keep trying.
I think there's this aspect. We're all human, so we all make mistakes, and some people make some really big, whopping ones. And then it's like instead of focusing on the more serious issues, people then they focus on the minutiae.
And they focus on what you believe because
Mm,
Protestants and Catholics, but Protestants, I think it's Catholics say you're saved by worship and good works, and Protestants say you're saved only by worship. I may be wrong on that, so forgive me if I'm wrong, but one or the other. But anyone who just says it's all on how you worship, they're basically making their religion an exit plan for the afterlife.
mm,
Doesn't matter what you do here or how mean you are, as long as you believe the right thing. And of course, that's where I came in with Henry's death.
mm.
And I will actually say to them, well, if you're right, then I'm going to hell and I'll continue to do my very best to help the people in hell when I'm there. I
Well,
don't believe
let's
in
pray
hell,
you're not, but
actually.
yeah, I know what you mean. It's
Yeah.
Sheikhul Islam Dr. Tariq Qadri in the conference I was at in Sheffield on Sunday. He highlighted this very same point in his own way, where he was saying that the fitna, the calamity, the problem within the society, much of it is coming from the ulama, from the mulanas, the
Mm,
alims, the imams. He said, who are fighting amongst each other and saying who is going to go to heaven and who isn't, and who is, I'm paraphrasing, of course, but he was
mm,
saying along these lines. And you're driving people out of religion. Shouldn't you be attracting people towards it instead of driving people away? Shouldn't be showing more love and
mm,
kindness? And I mean, that was well attended as well by many ulama from,
mm.
religious scholars from different groups within the Muslim community. But this is a serious problem, you find with a number of different religions these days. And what good can come from that? It's like we have to, I mean, even like the Quran itself, it's not addressed really to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. It's addressed to humanity
Mm.
through the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. It's given
Yeah.
to the Prophet, but for humanity.
Yeah.
It talks about humanity first, not, oh, you Muslims.
Mm.
You know, it talks
Yes.
to you as a human being, which is a reminder that first and foremost, we're all human beings. We're all the children of Adam and Eve.
Yes.
And I know there are echoes of this also within Christianity and within Judaism as well.
Mm. Yes. Well, I also have the strange issue of I am not Church of England. I am a Catholic priest,
Mm,
which came around with, again, that was that was God without a doubt. I knew I had a vocation. There came a point when I thought, oh God, I have to do something with this. No, 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 no. And I wasn't going to be welcome in the Church of England. And I didn't actually back then, I couldn't be a vicar in the Church of England. This was more than 30 years
mm.
ago. I could have been a deacon, but our local vicar wasn't keen on me because I studied Kabbalah, which he told my mother was devil worship, by the way.
Oh dear.
And so I started training with a church called Unity, which I came across while I lived in America for a while. It's a lovely, open, nominally Christian, but doesn't have community. It's not a sacramental church. And the people there were so kind to me. And I fitted there. So I started training for ministry with them. And then halfway through the training, they changed the rules and said you could only become a minister if you have a degree, which I didn't have a degree.
Mm,
So I'd done half the seminary and I was sort of out on my ear. I'd also done a year at Birmingham University studying New Testament Greek. And I thought, well, God, if you want me in in the teaching group, you're going to have to find me a way. And I just got guided to start doing funerals for people. This was before celebrants were really popular, because nowadays most people will have a celebrant for a funeral because they'll want something that is secular. Um, but I started working with a company in London and I found somebody to train me as a funeral minister. And I started doing funerals there. And I got through my husband, his best friend was murdered in London, saving the life of an elderly lady. And I got to do his funeral at Golders Green Crematorium. And it was terrifying, Paul. Funerals are the most scary things to do because you've got to get them right. And for me, you've got to get the balance between serving the congregation who's there and actually talking to the soul of the dead person. Because a funeral was originally developed to make sure the soul went through,
Mm.
make quite sure they knew they were dead and to guide them to the afterlife. But anyway, I was doing this funeral for John. And the weekend afterwards, I got a phone call absolutely out of the blue from a bishop in the Apostolic Liberal Catholic Church who said, I was at John Taylor's funeral and God spoke to me and he said, we need you and you need us.
Mm.
And I went, oh. And he talked to me a little about what it was. And he said, you'll never be accepted. As a female Catholic priest, you will be despised, you will be rejected, but that's what I'm inviting you to because I believe it's your path. And he was very clever. He said, look, I tell you what, invite me up for the weekend, cook me a nice roast dinner. He was a single man. And if you don't want to do it by the end of the weekend, we'll say no more about it. So he came up for the weekend. And by the end of it, I thought, no, this is what I have to do. But oh my God, the resistance the night before ordination to the diaconate, which is the first process. In fact, you should be an acolyte before, but my bishop kindly kept me. He had an ongoing seminary. You just continued studying with him all the time. He was a former Catholic priest who left the Roman Catholic Church for the Apostolic Liberal Catholic
Yeah, I
Church.
got a question on here. Someone was asking, how can you be a Catholic priest? Because they
Yeah,
don't know this.
well, I'm ordained in the apostolic succession in front of witnesses of 100 people, who and certain mystics who were there said they saw the hand come down to confer the ordination on me. It doesn't come from the bishop. It doesn't actually come from the moment he lays his hands on your head, or even when he anoints your hand. But I felt the moment that it came, and several of my friends who were there said, "Oh, that was the moment. You could actually see that you were being called and chosen." So it's not accepted by most people. And in fact, technically, I've been excommunicated by Pope Benedict too, because he had a decree at the Council of the Doctrine of Faith in 2007. He said that any woman ordained into the Catholic Church was immediately to be excommunicated, past, present, and future, and any bishop who ordains her also, which is just a blanket no. But people say to me, do you think that Pope Francis and now Pope Leo should open the doors to ordination of women? And actually, I don't. And I don't because the role is to stop asking permission to join that society, to join that club. For women to say, I want you to let me into your club is actually going to be under the rules of those clubs. And I've seen this with so many women in the Church of England that they find it really hard to work within this system because they actually want to do something like a wild church or a children's church. And there's a certain amount of leeway, but not that much. So my view, and of course I can be wrong, is that we need to do this from the grassroots. Let's just get in there and do the work and build up our own little groups as we can to the people who will resonate with what we're teaching. Instead of going out there and saying, I want to take over this, but still doing the same old routine, because the same old routine isn't updated. And I'm writing a book at the moment called What If? Reimagining Christianity for a post-MAGA age, which is sort of taking that we've got to really redo this. And I'm literally writing liturgies from the feminine point of view, based on exactly the same structure. Calling Father God, Mother Earth, bringing in all these different aspects. The book will be published. Whether it will take off, I do not know, but I just know it's really important for me to write liturgies for miscarriage, for childbirth, for abortion, for divorce. And I always say to people when I marry them, if by any chance this does not work out, and I pray that it does and you stay in love forever and it's wonderful. If it doesn't, please come back to me and I will do you a ritual of separation in the eyes of God, because although it does say in the New Testament, those whom God has brought together, let no human put asunder, God can and God will.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. That's one thing that is permitted in the Quran, even though it's God dislikes divorce, but it's permitted and it's explicitly permitted as well, which is, of course, I think Christianity had more of a struggle with this than Islam does in that way.
Yes, it
Um,
does.
but it's true. I mean, it's unfortunate, but some people they're not matched, and it's not working. I mean, why would you keep two people together if it's torture for them? It's
Well,
not
it's
healthy,
also adulterous, you know, the
Yeah.
commandment, thou shalt not commit adultery. To adulterate something is to add a poison to it. So it's not just about don't go off and have a fling with your secretary or your somebody else. It's actually, is there adultery in your marriage? Is there a poison in your marriage? And sometimes two people staying together can become a poison. And I'm all for
Mm,
working on relationships. I'm quite sure a lot of people don't work on them. They think it's going to be all airy-fairy and absolutely wonderful. But sometimes it's like friendship. You're there for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And my second marriage was there for a reason and a season. And
mm,
once I'd wound myself back to being comfortable with mystical Christianity, and once my partner, my husband, had wound himself back to being comfortable with mystical Judaism, our role with each other was gone. It was done. And God made that very, very clear because we were having some troubles. And one of the things about Unity Church that I love is they have a prayer group called Silent Unity. If you go to unity.org/prayer, they have affirmative prayer for you where they will literally hold you in prayer for 30 days, 24 hours a day. They have shifts in the chapel, and I've had the privilege of working there. And my God, the power that comes out of that chapel. So my ex and I were having problems, and he'd gone away to New York to take part in a singing contest. And I said, I give my marriage back to you, God. This is in your hands now. I am
mm,
willing to do whatever it takes to help this marriage work, to show me what I need to do, show me what needs to be done from my end, and bless the marriage, please, and divine order. And 3 days later, he left me.
mm.
So I couldn't even be cross. It was most annoying.
Yeah.
And again, maybe I'm
It's,
wrong. Maybe I'm completely and utterly deluded, but I am a very happy woman with a faith that sustains me and helps me sustain others. And I can't think that's wrong.
there's a lot of people that they don't have that, and
No.
that's something, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, we
Mm.
both have that. We're both very, very blessed.
Alhamdulillah, yeah, true.
Mm. And we need not to shove it down other people's throats.
Well, that's the other thing as well, isn't it? It's we get a lot of that these days, and even
Mm.
if it's from, I mean, I get irritated even if it's from other Muslims if they're like coming across with that kind of, it, it doesn't do anything. It just drives people away. If you push, you will
Mm.
always push people away. You never attract people. You never bring
Yeah.
people.
Yes.
And I don't see that from what I read about Jesus's character in the Gospels, and also in the Gospels that are not in the Bible,
Mm.
that like the Gospel of Thomas and the
Mm.
ones like Hammadi scrolls and things like this, I don't see in them that Jesus was this kind of very pushy person. He seemed like a person who's trying to educate and help people and
Mm.
support them. And
Mm.
I see the same, with the life of Muhammad. Obviously, Muhammad was a different character to Jesus in the way
Mm.
that he came across, and his mission was a bit different because
Mm.
he also had to become an authority person. He
Mm.
had to actually take care of his society
Yeah.
in much the same way that Moses had to,
Yeah.
and take it to a new place in a leadership role aside from
Mm.
religion as well. And from that, what did he do? He created the Constitution of Medina, in which he said he named the Jewish tribes and
Mm.
the Muslims, and he said we have a different religions, but we one ummah.
Yeah.
And he wasn't saying, "Oh, you all must convert now."
Mm.
And he wrote letters to the Christians and said that you are my allies and my citizens,
Mm.
and if you come under attack, the Muslims must protect you.
Mm.
Um, I think we could do with a bit more of that these days, rather than some of the other
Mm.
craziness that we hear about.
And we
We
also
need to
have to
get back to our
realize,
roots, you know.
yeah, the cultural attitudes of certain days. So the stuff in St. Paul's writings about women not preaching, not going out in the streets and preaching. Uh, it's entirely possible he was trying to protect us because in those days, in Rome and in Greece, women did not go out on their own. Now, obviously, we're talking about the middle classes and the upper classes
Mm,
because nobody bothered to do the history on the people who were working in the marketplace, and I expect that was very different. But a middle class or an aristocratic Roman or Greek woman literally did not go out of her house unaccompanied. It was not done. Far worse in Greece than in Rome. Jewish women could. Jewish women could own property. Obviously it went to their husband if they were married, but if they were divorced or they were widowed, the property came back to them. Jewish women had a lot more autonomy. And Paul was a Roman citizen, and certainly at the time he was writing, there was a cult in Rome called the Magna Mater cult, a goddess called Cybele, who had a son. She was a virgin birth, a son called Attis. And Attis was murdered, and Cybele resurrected him. It's similar to the Isis, Osiris, and
Yeah.
Horus story. And the priests of Cybele, they were called the Galli, and they were probably what we would now call transgender folk because they were self-mutilated. They cut their own testicles off, and they wore their hair loose and long, and they wore long women's clothing, and they praised Cybele in the streets, and they were thought to be an abomination by most of Rome, and they literally could be cut down in the street. So, a Roman who worshipped Mars or something like that would come across one of the Galli of Cybele and say, "You disgusting little pervert," and slice their head off and get away with it. So, if you've got somebody who looks
Very
like a
different world back
woman
then.
and sounds like a woman talking about a resurrected God, she was going to be in danger.
Mm.
So, even if he did say all those things, we know they were edited in it later, but even if they were edited for the best possible reason, Buddha also said it isn't safe for women
Mm.
to teach. So let's just turn this around and say, well, then it wasn't safe. Now maybe it is.
And I think that the thing there as well, that was a letter written by Paul to a community.
Mm,
Bearing in mind, like, and I'm sure, like, Islamic scholars are taught, the good ones, it's that you have to understand the cultural context before you make a religious ruling, a fatwa,
mm,
on a particular issue within that
yeah,
context.
yeah.
This is why Imam Shafi, he would make one different fatwa in Egypt and another one in Jerusalem.
Mm,
Why did he do that?
yeah,
Because he knew that the context was different within those two societies. There was
yeah,
something different which caused him to take that into account, and that's why he made a different fatwa. And this is what scholars of the past used to do. You
yes,
know, well, maybe they would even refrain from making a fatwa in a society that they were not sure about the cultural customs and stuff
yes,
until they got to know it.
yes.
Similarly, in Indonesia, the scholars that settled there, they often did things differently and made different rulings to what you'd find elsewhere because
Mm,
they understood the cultural context. Um, Now, obviously, St. Paul, he was a Roman citizen. He understood about this Roman community,
mm,
and he also understood about the community in, the Holy Land as well.
yeah, yeah,
So it's like he would understand what was similar and what was different, and this is why he said things that he did.
yeah.
Um, but
I
people
think
don't
he
understand the
would be
context, and they
horrified.
jump to conclusions. Yeah,
I would think he'd be horrified that he's been so set in stone.
quite. I'm sure. I mean, I think we could probably say that about a lot of the scholars
Mm,
and the apostles and people within different religions. I mean, Imam Malik, he wrote a famous book called Muwatta, and the people at the time were so impressed with it that the caliph, he actually said, "Can we make this the official book? Basically that's the guide for Sharia. Everyone has to follow your Muwatta." And he
mm.
was like, "Heaven forbid."
Yeah,
He says, I've created it as a, I hope it's a good guide, but he said, please check it. I might
yeah,
have made a mistake.
yeah,
I would hate to think that if I'd made a mistake and then that was enforced upon everyone,
yeah,
um, you know,
yeah,
and that's why, Islam had that approach. And the other thing, of course, we highlighted earlier, I mean, Jesus and Muhammad, both of them would have had female disciples and
yes,
companions,
yes,
people that were studying from them that were women. And that often gets forgotten. I mean, within the Islamic tradition, we've got a bit more of it because there are many hadiths that are narrated by Aisha within the Sunni tradition.
mm,
Also Fatima Zahra, and some women also take a prominent role also within Shia tradition. So there is some of that still that's preserved within our books. And there are many female scholars of the past, and
mm,
that's been recorded. I've got a book behind me actually that details about female scholars of the
mm.
past. Some of them set up, like madrasas, like colleges and things as well. But there must have been something like that within the Christian tradition as well. but for whatever reason, and we see a little bit of it within like the Gnostic Gospels and things, that there was something there that it didn't end up in the Bible in the end, but it was within these Gospels that were around the time that the other Gospels were written, and there must have been communities around that, communities that were using these books before it was clamped down on.
Yeah.
Um,
And I have a slightly unpopular opinion in that I do not believe that Jesus was married to Mary Magdalene, because I think that's a flat out insult.
hmm,
The whole Da Vinci Code thing about the bloodline coming from Jesus and Mary Magdalene makes her special because she's Mrs. Jesus. And Gospel of Luke makes it quite clear she's a woman of substance. She has her own money. And it says Joanna, wife of Chusa, and Susanna, identifying the other women by their husbands. And she would not have been called Mary of Magdala. She had been Mary of Jesus, even if she married him just before he went to the crucifixion. She could only ever have been his second wife because they were all married 6 months after puberty in those days. I mean, Jesus's story vanishes after he goes to the temple with his parents as a child until he's 33. So, one of the books I've written is called The Marriage of Jesus, which has both factual and fiction text in it. So I'm looking at the whole context about why we've taught this, but I've also got a narrative in there where he marries at the age of 16 and has a wife called Tamar and children, and then Tamar dies. And that's the point at which he shaves off everything and goes out into the desert and becomes who he is. But the man who's teaching knows and loves women. And I believe that Mary Magdalene, apostle to the apostles, as she's called, was the female equivalent who worked beside him, because with the rituals of purity, there would have had to have been a woman. There would also have had to have been a woman for the Sabbath Eve service in those days. But I don't think she was his wife. I think she was a spiritual companion. And I think that's far more important than just saying there's a bloodline, you're the Merovingian and people are descended from
hmm.
Jesus. Because trust me, messianic ability does not go down the bloodline.
Oh dear. Yeah, it's we see this also within some Sufi communities where the son automatically becomes the next sheikh.
Mm,
The original sheikh, the original person who went on that mystical spiritual journey, they had something. But
mm.
unless the son went on the same journey, then he's not going to have what his father had.
No, he has to go on
If he
his own
did, then maybe
journey.
he does. There are examples. I'm not saying they're all
Yeah.
not true. I mean, I know some sheikhs that I can see that their father was a sheikh and
Mm,
they've clearly gone on their own journey and they have something. But I also I've seen the opposite where they clearly don't. And
yeah.
that could create problems. People put them in the same position and speak to them as if they're the sheikh when
Mm,
they don't have the same insights as what their father or their grandfather or great grandfather had. So how can they help people?
yeah.
And maybe they could give completely the wrong advice, which could be very harmful in some cases. It's
A
yeah,
friend of mine has a lovely saying, which is that when a religion loses its spiritual impulse, when the leader dies,
mm,
then they have to hold on to the law until the next spiritual person comes along. And if the next spiritual person is rejected by the law, then they will become bound to the law. Because the next spiritual teacher will say, well, that was the law then, but let's move it on a bit. And that's what Jesus does. He says, I came to fulfill the law. And basically, all Jesus does is say, let's interpret the law through love,
mm.
i.e., the Sabbath was made for humanity, not humanity for the Sabbath. And, okay,
He
ritual
doesn't
laws of
reject it.
purity.
He doesn't
Yeah,
get rid of it, but he
yeah,
just yeah. I see what you say. It's like
yeah.
a new lens that he's looking at it through.
Yeah, and the ritual laws, of course, most of the Old Testament laws were superb for people living in a desert society without A&E, antibiotics, or even hot water. An awful
Mm.
lot of the stuff that we're told to do. Um, of course, in Christianity, we will eat pork, and I think it's entirely possible that God knows we've invented the fridge. I don't mind one way or the other. If your face says don't eat pork, that's okay. But God
Mm.
does know we've invented the fridge. And the main problem, I mean, it's so sensible to tell a desert society not to eat pork or shellfish because it goes off and it'll kill you.
Yeah,
God can
it
be
does seem to be
practical
that
too.
was the reason behind it. It's so it's and there's a few other things that with pork also, they're very easy to transmit to people.
Mm.
Yeah, I don't eat it myself, but I can understand why something may apply in one place more than it applies in another place.
Yeah, and I have no problem with your following that law. If you want to follow
Mm,
those laws, that's absolutely fine by me, and I follow quite a few of them too. And every now and then I say, "Well, do you want me to do this?" And sometimes God will say, "Today it's appropriate, tomorrow may not."
mm.
And my Jewish husband was wonderful like that because he didn't eat pork at all. But every year on my birthday, he would cook me bacon.
No way.
He
Wow.
didn't eat it, but he knew I love bacon. We didn't eat pork because he was Orthodox Jewish. Um, And also, if we went out for dinner and the person hadn't realized and they cooked something with pork, he would just eat it because he knew from the Hasidim teaching that loving kindness is greater even than truth. And to insult a host by saying, "Oh, I'm not going to eat that." Now, if you have an allergy or you seriously dislike something, then that's fair enough. But he would say,
Mm.
"No, they've taken the time and trouble to cook me supper. We didn't tell them that I don't eat pork. They didn't realize it. I will eat the pork." And I think that's excellent.
It's a very difficult situation when you're in. I know I've been in that situation on occasions
Mm.
where I've been offered something that doesn't suit me. Yeah, it's difficult.
Every situation is difficult, and there
Yeah,
will be times when it's important for you to say, "No, I can't eat that." But
but
in this,
again, the other thing is, it's to do it compassionately, do it in
yes,
a sweet way, and appreciate the time and trouble someone's gone to,
yes,
and not be like, "How dare you? You could present." It's like, which some people would. I mean, it's
yeah, they
like
would.
we
How
could.
dare you insult me by giving me
And
pork?
the other thing is, I mean, if you turn it down, they're already going to be feeling bad because they haven't hosted you. So
Yes,
you have to comfort them, and
yeah,
show,
yeah.
and not
Well,
not
you can be
just,
perfectly polite and say beforehand, "Excuse me, I don't eat pork or shellfish."
yeah, it's true. And normally I would, it's like, but fortunately, I don't think I've ever been offered pork. But the chicken or the beef might not be strictly halal. What do you
No,
do
of
then?
course.
Well, it's a halal animal. It's not pork. So
Yeah.
it's, and people, how do I put this? People sort of handle these things in different ways. But
Yes.
it's like, as long as we handle it with politeness and with compassion and understanding and appreciation for the
Mm.
fact that someone's gone out of their way to cook for us, as long as you can see that they're doing it in good faith and they're being kind, you don't push back against that in a negative way or a toxic way.
No, if
Uh,
somebody deliberately cooked something for you that you weren't meant to eat and they did it as a
that's
nasty thing,
different. Yeah, I
absolutely, you
mean,
have every right to say, no.
but you can tell from the way people present themselves and the way they do things.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
Anyway,
Well, it's the same
Maggie,
with
it's been,
vegetarians and vegans.
yeah,
I find it quite difficult cooking vegan food, but I have two
mm,
friends who are vegans, therefore I will cook vegan food. They do not cook sausages for me, but I will respectfully cook vegan food for them. I don't expect them to cook sausages for me because I
yeah.
can eat vegan perfectly well. Thank you very much.
No, it's the same as well, and it's nice sometimes to have some vegetarian food. It's yeah,
It's all about just having kindness and respect. It's also about standing up for your own dignity sometimes. So I think every single situation has to be addressed in the moment right now. And the name that ultimate name we were given when Moses is at the burning bush is that the name of the Holy One is I am that I am. And that means presence
yeah,
now. Not the God of 2000 years ago, but the God of now.
living in the moment. This is something
Living,
which you
yes,
find across all spiritual traditions.
yes,
And
absolutely.
yeah, I mean, if you're quoting something that is without contextualization from the
Yes.
past, I mean, there's certainly, you can quote things from the past. We have been here, where we can take the wisdom from it, contextualize it, and take that and bring it into the 21st century. But if you just quote things out of context from a different society, it won't make any sense and it won't be helpful for people.
No.
It has to be transmitted in a way that is compassionate and understanding and reflecting the times in which we're living as well. I
Yes.
mean, there were certain things. It's like the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, established a legal system in Medina. Why? Because it was lawless.
Yeah.
These tribes were fighting each other. They were killing each other.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't mean that every last detail of that legal system that he established then in Medina has to be transmitted to a society today without understanding that society has changed, or without having, you know, any kind of air traffic control laws or road laws, or, you know, which didn't exist back then. But you can certainly take the same wisdoms that he
Yes.
used to create that system and even apply that to air traffic control or the road system, or, you know, because principles of justice, principles of fairness, these are universal, but not necessarily the exact way something was written, you know, 1,500 or 2,000 or 5,000 or 6,000 years ago. You know, it's yeah.
Yeah. We are who we are now, and God is here in us, with us, pervading us. I'm not a pantheist, which is everything is God, but I am a panentheist, which is that God imbues everything. God is God is God, and God imbues me. And I often tell people that I think, in a funny kind of way, God has millions and millions of hands with fingers, and there's one finger that is Maggie, and there's one finger that is Paul. And that is the link back to the whole body of God, but it's unique to you. You in absolute relationship with God. God knows you, trusts you, loves you, and guides you. But that is the guidance for you, the
I
beloved
wouldn't
child.
quite put it in that way, but I think I get what you're getting at.
Mm. Yeah, well,
And
you don't have to agree with me at all. Mostly
of
we're
course,
agreeing with each other wonderfully, but why would I mind if you don't agree with me? Because
but
I may
certainly, I
not
mean,
be
that there
right.
is something about our soul which is connected to God,
Mm,
and the real connection is deep within us. I mean, this is why we're supposed to get to know ourselves, and then
mm,
when we get to know ourselves, we know God. And this is
absolutely.
something which was taught by the prophets and you know, the great spiritual leaders of our tradition.
Yeah.
And well, that must mean there's something deep within our soul, within our root,
Mm.
which, if we understand that, we understand something of the divine. Um,
Kabbalah's really good at teaching you the difference between your ego, yourself, and your soul.
mm, and yet
And
not the ego. The ego is obviously not that.
no, but when you realize that the ego always others,
Mm,
the ego always says, my tribe, my family, my belief.
yeah.
And everything other than that is not necessarily an enemy, but Richard Rohr puts it beautifully, alliteratively. He says the ego will always compare, contrast, compete, criticize, condemn, and then crucify.
Yeah, that's true.
And we don't realize nowadays how we live 90% of our lives in our egos. We automatically do, because it's the part of the brain that works on automatic. It's actually our ego that remembers to breathe while we're asleep, that part of the brain. But it doesn't do anything new. It does everything it's trained to do. But the true self and the soul are the ones that can deal with the new, the fresh, the today. And God actually can't really reach the ego because it's cut off. It's, I'm right. My tribe's right. I'm not listening to anybody else.
Mm.
And the ego will make you right even if you think you're the most miserable worm on the planet. Because if you think you're the most miserable worm, the ego will have to prove you right.
We taught the similar thing within Sufism. Probably the approach is maybe slightly different, but
Mm,
the same principles there, and everything you're saying about the ego. Yeah, my sheikhs taught me that in their own way.
mm,
And you know, when you start to see things as we, us,
mm,
you know, not I on my own and I'm better than everyone, but we bring everybody together, connect people, connect hearts. It's like within Kabbalah, the light in the heart, connecting that with everyone else's light and
mm.
seeing that it's one light.
Yes,
Um, that principle is within Sufism,
yes.
and that's within all traditions, actually. You know, when you get to the deeper, more mystical side of it, that's what it's
Mm.
about.
You kind of
when
have to
when
come
when we
out of your
cultivate
tribe.
that, then we start to feel connection with people. Instead of making barriers and differences and conflict and trouble,
Mm,
we start to look for solutions and, you know, how to make things better for everyone.
mm.
And that's when you see wonderful things happen that, you know, wouldn't happen otherwise.
Mm. Yes, you go from the tribal consciousness to become working out who you actually are, what you actually believe. And then you go into the soul consciousness, which is that we're all in this together.
Mm,
You know, we are all God's beloved children, and God's beloved children on the other side of the planet who are a different color for us are God's beloved children. And I heard this phrase the other day, which I started using, which is people of the global majority,
mm,
because white people are not the global majority. And I just thought that had a lot more dignity to it. I'm not sure what my friends who are Afro-Caribbean or Pakistani or Indian or Asian think of it. I don't know yet, but it seems to me like it's a term of great respect to say, you are the majority. Here we are, the minority, trying to lay our laws down on you. And how ridiculous is that?
yeah, true. It's no, it's we've got to find a way forward that's a better way, certainly for the world. Don't know if you and I are going to do it, but it's
I
people
think
people
that
have to
talking
find it, you know.
together is a good
Mm.
start. And I'm learning a lot from you, Paul. So that's really lovely for me. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I really appreciated all the insights you shared and sharing with me your journey and your experience. And thank you so much, Maggie, for joining us today. I know
Thank
we
you.
went on a little bit longer than I originally said, but the conversation was flowing, and you, thank you.
It's been
I hope
delightful.
I haven't
Thank
made
you.
you late for your next appointment or meeting,
You
but
made me late for my next cup of tea. This is terrible. I shall never
oh, I'm
forget.
sorry.
Bless you, Paul. Thank you very much indeed.
Bless you too, Maggie, and thank you so much. Wish everybody a wonderful afternoon if you're in the UK and wherever you are in the world, a good morning and good evening. Thank you for joining us today. And if you like these podcasts, please do like, subscribe. And also, there's a Buy Me a Coffee link, which if you want to support the work that I'm doing, and that will help me to focus on creating more great content. Take care. God bless you all. Until next time. Assalamu alaikum.